Which unit is more worrisome, i.e. could struggle in the super big sports game?
I know where I'm going with this.
Chiefs offense or Niners defense?
Oh, I thought we were being a little more specific.
Negative. Well, you've got two units that, I mean, they've just kind of been hit and miss, right? Like the Chiefs offense all season, but it's been better lately. Niners defense is just stacked, but yet lately it's not been as good. So which of those two would you worry about struggling more?
Niners defense.
I would agree.
It's not good right now. It isn't. And
I wonder why. Has anybody put their finger on why that is?
The defensive line just isn't playing well.
Chase Young's not very good.
Chase Young hasn't been very good. Armstead has been battling some injuries.
You can also get after their corners too a little bit.
And that's the part, is that the secondary isn't with Hufanga being out, and the secondary just isn't what it was in years past.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, that made a difference for them.
Yeah,
he's a stud.
Yeah, he's one of the better young safeties in the league. So the corners are decent. They're not great. The best player you have in your secondary is out. I love the linebacking core, but I think one of the things that has masked the secondary, like you either in today's NFL world, you either have a defensive line that can hide your secondary, or you can have a secondary that can hide your defensive line. And clearly with the Niners, it's been their defensive line that is supposed to hide the secondary problems. But lately, their defensive line, with the exception, I think in the second half of the Lions game, we saw some Bosa start to pick up a little bit, but Hargrave hasn't been what they wanted when they went out and got.
Hargrave and Armstead both had been banged up a little bit, but they're not producing.
No, they're not producing, and you haven't seen much from Chase Young, and so Bosa and Gregory hasn't been any sort of real addition for them. So we thought they were just going to have, and Kinlaw again has been a disappointment. They're just not huge difference makers. So
they're not consistent. You can get a big game out of somebody every now and then, but it's not every single snap, every single series you're expecting to be stout.
So when you look at this Niners defense, and you say, dude, if Bosa isn't just wrecking us, if he's not out there just playing with his hair on fire, and he's facing more double teams, he's facing more chips, I think teams are starting to figure out he's the one guy that scares you a little bit, and they're adjusting accordingly. And so far, those other guys really haven't made them pay. And the other scary one is they're not setting the edge. If you watch Detroit and you watch Green Bay, they ran outside of those guys, and they weren't setting the edge with tackles. They were setting the edge with tight ends and wide receivers. You can't have, in this league, you cannot allow your defensive ends to get sealed off by wide receivers. If you do, welcome to the outside. And both Green Bay and Detroit slaughtered them with that. So when you take a defensive line that I think is underperforming, and you take a secondary that isn't elite and is without their best player, I'm sorry, I think the Niners defense, I think right now it's overrated. I think when we think of the 49ers, we think of defense. Like you're like, oh man, the Niners defense, it's rugged, it's nasty. But if you go back to the first time these two teams played, yeah, the Niners defense was really good. And I'm not saying this unit is trash, but this is not an elite defensive unit. And it's funny because we think of Kansas City as being this offensive juggernaut.
They're the elite unit.
The best unit on the field come Super Bowl Sunday
defense
will be the Chiefs defense.
Yeah, because the Kansas City offense is not a juggernaut. It's got Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, the best unit on the field of all special teams, offense, defense, will be the Kansas City Chiefs defense.
So as we kick off Super Bowl, very hot Super Bowl talk here on a Monday. Anyone catch that? No? I don't really understand why the Niners are favored.
I don't either.
And I don't like that for betting purposes, because I've already bet the Chiefs, and now I'm like, well, what am I missing?
Yeah, and it's weird because it feels like it's a sharp square thing where everybody and their mother seems to love the Chiefs because it's like, well, why would you bet against Mahomes? Why would you bet against the better defense? But every sharp, I read a stat today or heard a stat, every bet over $500,000 that's come in through the MGM platforms has all been on Niners money line.
This scares me a little bit because, I do this. Whenever there's a significant game, I do try to, believe it or not, do some due diligence and try to bring some cohesive, hey, these are matchups. I try to go through position by position and try to do a pretty good dive into this. And it reminds me a little bit of the AFC title game when I sat here and broke it down, and I went pretty passionate and I felt strongly about it. When you went through matchup by matchup, Baltimore, with the exception of quarterback and then maybe tight end, And I thought tight end was a little bit of a push. But, that was the only real big advantage that Kansas City had. Everything all year said Baltimore. And when I look at this one, it's the exact opposite. When I look through most of the matchups, I'll give you running back, huge advantage. Huge advantage for the 49ers and at wide receiver. And outside of that, it's all Kansas City.
The Niners' skill players, running backs, receivers, tight ends, they have it. Everything else is KC.
And by the way, the 49ers have a kicker that is beyond unreliable. He's missed a kick in every single one of the playoffs. And meanwhile, Kansas City's got a guy who's just a stone cold killer.
Automatic.
So, I mean, for the life of me, when I look at this, I can't figure out why the 49ers are favored. Everything in my being says, dude, you load up and you take Kansas City. By the way, Kansas City has won these, plenty of times. This is a battle-tested team. The 49ers, yeah, they were there a couple years ago, but not everyone was there, especially your quarterback. Shanahan doesn't have a great track record in big games. By the way, even the coaching platform.
Got to give the advantage to Reed.
Head coach and coordinators. It's Kansas City. So why? I can't figure out other than they're begging me to do it, which means go the other way and take the 49ers.
You have just laid out the perfect case to put your entire mortgage on the San Francisco 49ers.
Exactly. I don't know if I'm going to bet this. I will because I'm a degenerate, but
here's a reason why. So I already bet the Chiefs, and honestly, Suke, if I lose,
you're on the right side.
I feel like I'm good losing with them.
You can lose putting your money behind Mahomes and Reed in that
That's
defense.
right. If they lose, it's like give the Niners credit because I'll just ride with Mahomes and the Chiefs any day.
Yeah.
I think maybe the Niners are favored partially because the line is like the odds makers don't overreact. Okay. They it's just all a numbers game to them. And when they run the numbers, it is a number, the point spread is a number that is spit out based on the season long worth of football. Mm-hmm. And they don't adjust for how a team is playing now. That's where they get the public, right? The public will overreact to something they saw last week.
Recency bias is the public, and they're looking at the whole swath of the season.
They're looking at the whole thing. And San Francisco is very talented. Probably the more talented team, probably by the numbers.
And the Chiefs tripped all over themselves multiple times in the regular season, and that's being taken into account too. But they're playing better now.
And I think by the numbers, they're not out thinking this, and that's why San Francisco is favored. Now, the early money, which is sharp money, it's a little contrary to what Buck was saying. The Niners opened at -2.5. The early money is always sharp money. Because the public doesn't bet until they remember, the Super Bowl's today, I better get my bet in, type of thing, right? That was a lot of it was Chiefs money because the line came all the way down to 1. So they moved it 1.5. Now it's jumped back up to 2. So that could be some sharp money too on San Francisco. But the early money came in on the Chiefs. I think a lot of people saw that and went, well, I'm not out thinking this.
I'll take the Chiefs.
Kansas City right now.
Yeah.
And now it sits at 2, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with it Saturday and Sunday because that's when a lot of action is going to come in on it from the public. And I wonder if they won't just start betting KC right and left.
See, and I'm the opposite to you bring up a very valid point in that you take a look at the entire season. I don't like doing that because to me,
which team is playing better right now?
I don't give two F's what happened in the first 8 weeks of the season. To be honest with you, I don't care what happened in the first 12 weeks. They say this all the time. Every team that I was a part of, they take the season, now it's 17, so it's a little funky, but there's 4 quarters to a season. You go 4 games at a time. And no one cares what you did in the first 3 quarters. What did you do in the last quarter of the season? And I look at San Francisco, who laid some tremendous eggs, see the Baltimore ass whooping that they took, and then they get the bye week. And I'm sorry, they have been outplayed in 7 of the 8 quarters in the playoffs so far. And look, everyone gets fortunate at this time of the year.
But here they are.
You need a little luck, but they have found a way. But like Green Bay let them off the hook. And Detroit, if Josh Reynolds just catches a pass, if Gibbs doesn't fumble, I mean, the Lions had a half dozen plays that if one player makes a play in that second half. We're not talking about San Francisco being here, and I'm not saying that it's a fluke or that they don't deserve to be here, but I look at Kansas City that has kind of been very, okay to solid most of the year, and in the last 3 weeks has played their best football. Look at the offenses that they have absolutely stymied. And their offense, and all of a sudden Travis Kelce has found the fountain of youth, and he looks like the Travis Kelce of old. And their tackles, who have been beyond spotty all year, their left tackle hasn't given up a sack. I don't even know if he's given up a pressure all postseason. They're playing their best ball right now. And so when I look at those two things, to say that San Francisco is the most consistent team, maybe they do end up winning, but to me, when I look at this, I don't care that they were more consistent all year. Well, I care the last 2 to 3 weeks, and Kansas City has by far been the better team. Oh, and they have the better coach. I think they have most of the position groups that they have an advantage of, and they have this guy by the name of Patrick Mahomes.
Just right there, better quarterback, better defense. Yeah. I'll bet on Kansas City. Everything you said is why I'm not going to overthink it. I've already bet Kansas City. Okay, but the odds makers don't think that way. They look at it like, in other words, if we said, hey, the Niners and Chiefs are going to meet in the Super Bowl, and we said this to you in week 10, you would have been like, oh my God, Niners all day.
Yeah.
Something to be said for that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like regression to the mean. Okay, the team has played poorly or not as well the last couple games, but here they are still in the Super Bowl. They know they got to step it up. Kansas City, maybe again, regression to the mean. Maybe they're due to come back more like they played the rest of so they don't. The odds makers just don't overreact, which is, I think that's really why the Niners are favored. Yeah. And yet I'll just go to bat with everything you just said. Like that, it's like that makes total sense to me. So even if I'm on the wrong side of it, that's a good bet to place, and that's all I want to do is place good bets.
And it's not a situation where we've seen in the past where both teams are completely firing going in. The Niners are not. So if you're just trusting your eyeballs and what you've seen the last 2 weekends, that's the play to make.
One other thing, I've got Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl numbers.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Actually, they're not.
Really?
Really?
How much of that is skewed with the Tampa one?
Well,
because his playoff numbers are excellent.
Correct.
But the Super Bowl itself, not so much.
The Super Bowl is his worst game.
Oh, I'm intrigued.